Welcome to the Earn Your Marks podcast, presented by ProExam Tutors, the only podcast you need to pass the CFP exam and become a certified financial planner professional. Here's your host, Sev Maneshian.
I'm Sev Maneshian with ProExam Tutors. I'm certified financial planner, and I'm happy to have with me as my guest today, Jackie Cummings Koski, who is a newly minted CFP professional. So Jackie, welcome.
Yay. Hey, Sev, thank you for having me. And you are the first person I have talked to that's being recorded where I get to say I'm a CFP. So thank you for that introduction.
All right. Yeah, you got it. And I have to ask you, was it on your, so we got introduced to each other through the CFP, through the candidate forum, through the chat board, if you will. And then was it your post that I read? Are you the one that passed out when you got your, or was that?
I almost fainted. I really almost fainted when I saw the pass because it's so tiny and it's just so much stress that you build up in preparation for that exam. So
I know that it's a lot. And but no, I got worried about you for a second because like, oh, poor lady passed out.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing was that I had a study group, and we're on this text chain, and I'm texting, and I said I almost fainted, and then I paused. I did ... and then the suspense, and then I said I almost fainted when I saw the pass, and like, oh my God, we didn't know if you passed or failed.
Oh, that's cool. So, well, I'm glad you did. It's a ton of work. And you mentioned your study group, which I'll get back into in a second. But for today's podcast, the reason I invited you on, and thanks again, is that you are a career changer. And if you read a lot of the comments on the candidate forum, you'll see there are a lot of career changers. So I just wanted to know if you can help and give some advice to those that are getting into the profession, specifically as a CFP professional. More like, what's your, where did you come from? Like, what were you doing before? And then how did you make the switch to put in this huge amount of time and effort to pass in the exam?
It was a huge amount of time. And I have noticed a lot of career changes, and I guess I fall into that bucket. So my sort of switch or transition came as a result of me retiring extra early. So I guess I would consider myself part of the FIRE community. And if you don't know what that stands for, that's financial independence, retire early. All the major media is writing about it. So I retired in my late 40s from my corporate job, but I've been there 20 years. And it was a global data company. And I did account management, but it technically fell into the sales category, which you would think maybe that's a good, way to transition. I've got these sales skills that I had for a really long time. Sure. But so I retired, and my big goal when I retired was to get my master's degree. So I did horrible in undergrad, so I was afraid I wouldn't get accepted. But I applied to Kansas State because they had that financial therapy master's program. But part of that was also those 6 CFP courses that you have to take in order to, meet that requirement. So nice. That was not my intention. I'm going for the financial therapy part. Really, that's what attracted me. But as I'm in these,
not at all. Like you said, CFP was not on the radar.
I was more into financial literacy and financial education. That was my thing. My big dream, and the reason why I was retiring early, or part of it, was that I had this huge dream of creating a financially literate society. I wanted to touch a lot of people with the same type of financial education that helped me get to that point where I could retire so early. So as I'm going through these classes, the first 6 classes, it was so interesting that most of the people in there, they were taking the classes to fulfill that CFP requirement. So I'm like, no, I don't want to be a CFP. I don't want to mess with that exam. I kept saying, no. And I get to the financial therapy part. So that gave me almost a year's break. And I kept thinking about it. I had a lot of people along the way that was encouraging me to do it. The CFP board had published this survey or this research around the demographics that said only 1.8% of CFP certificates were Black, out of 90,000 plus. So there was all these little nuggets that kept tugging at me,
Yeah,
saying,
little
Jackie.
nudges along the way. Like,
yes. And
like,
I finally went down the rabbit hole, and I graduated with my master's degree in May.
Okay.
And well, I guess to go back a little earlier, I said, okay, there was the scholarship that I applied for, and I won that scholarship. I was awarded that scholarship, but the catch was that you had to sit for the CFP exam within a year.
So that scholarship was from where? Because people hear scholarship, there's some from the Financial Planning Association. There could be from the, there's different scholarships out there. So which one was that?
Okay, there's a lot of different scholarships. The one I ended up getting, it wasn't complete happenstance, but there was a CFP that had looked at this company. The company was called Origins, where they hired different CFPs to do contract work. And she sent it to me and thought I would be interested. And I'm like, I don't have my CFP, but I'm looking around their website and they have these first time ever, this $5,000 scholarship that they were offering. So I applied and I won the scholarship. So it's a private startup company in Silicon Valley that just have this huge support of diversity. They, I think it was like a total of 10 different scholarships, or they were awarding 10 scholarships. I'm like, okay, I might have a chance. So this was a private company that was offering this scholarship, not through the CFP board, but I know that there's a lot of other ones. This is the one that happened to work out for me. And they gave me the deadline, probably the deadline I needed.
Oh, nice. Okay. So that was $5,000, which for those listening and they're kicking around the idea of getting the certification, it runs about $5,000 to get the CFP certification.
Yeah. Once you got your education out of the way, like if I had to include what I paid for the courses at Kansas State, it would have been a lot more than that. Now, probably going for my master's degree, that costs a little bit more, but the 6 classes, if you include that, it might be a little bit more. But yeah, I would say once you got the classes out of the way, I would say it was probably right around $5,000.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So that's in Origins. Yeah. I remember, I mean, there are a lot of companies out there, and as far as, and a lot of them started up, let's say in the last 10 years or so, that where they would they sub out financial planning. So yeah, Origins, if you mentioned they're Silicon Valley, I think they are or were based out of San Fran, but
San Francisco. Yeah. I love their business model. So I was very attracted, and it made me want to spend some time on their website to see what they were about. And their business model was basically they would work with companies and they would provide financial planning services for their employees. And because it's San Francisco, it's a startup, a lot of it was things like equity compensation and things like that.
Right. Not much cash flow. Not much cash flow. We'll give you.
Well, and they've been expanding quite a bit, but I just really, and they did a lot of educating. So anything to do with education was like very interesting to me, and something that I knew I wanted to do. And whatever my business model was, the biggest part of it would be education.
Okay, so now you get the scholarship. So nicely done on that one.
Thank you.
One of the conditions, or probably the only condition on that, or one of the few, is that you've got to sit for the exam. And so you sat for that exam in November.
The latest I possibly could that year.
You pushed that one out. So, well, okay. So when you start, you're in the process of actually jumping in. You had to have a lot of questions. So did you find a mentor? Did you go to the CFP board site? Did Origins help you out? Like, how did you, who was kind of holding your hand at first or along the way?
Yeah, I would say probably the early help was like some of my, the people that were going through the program with me at Kansas State. We would have a study group, and most of those guys or most of those people were taking those classes to sit for the CFP exam. So the really early stuff came from my study group at Kansas State.
Okay.
And then after that, I would say the CFP board, I must say, does an outstanding job of providing information to the most common questions. So I spent a lot of time there. And then the CFP board's YouTube channel they do all these videos and webinars, and I attended most of them. To me, these are things that are really good done really early on your path to sitting for the CFP before you start your review course, because you have time to let things digest, to take the edge off a little bit. So I didn't have a single person. I had a lot of different people. And also I'd like to give credit to Origin, because not only did I earn the scholarship, they assigned me a mentor. And so that person was available for me. And that just gave me a little extra help that I really appreciate. And obviously, now that they had, awarded me the scholarship, they have something to gain, or they want to make sure that I'm successful.
Yeah.
So it was great that they did that. So before I even thought about signing up for a review course, it was so much. And then you were doing these YouTubes or these webinar sort of little study things, even though it was like months and months and months, at least 6 months to like 9 months before I would even sign up for the exam.
Okay.
If there were things like yours where you were giving it away for free, talking about the exam, doing some selected topics, diving into it in the level that you could expect to be on the CFP exam, and you were a tutor. So that was valuable to me. So I really appreciate what you were doing, and others that were giving people that needed a little more time a real close look into what to expect when they sign up for the review courses and the CFP exam itself.
Okay, good to know, because I mean, of course, and anybody who's taken it or will be taking it, it's a lot of information.
It's a lot.
And that's good that you had someone along the way, your mentor. Did you go through and let's say, did you know that there was a mentorship program through the CFP board as well?
I did. I was lucky enough to be able to be in the space where I could get mentors on my own. And it might not have been a formal partnership as mentors, but there were so many people that helped influence me, wave me in, and guide me. I mean, from everything to the exam to getting experience hours. So I was in, the same space as a lot of other, CFPs or aspiring CFPs that were helping me along the way. And so I never did sign up for that program. But if I had any trouble finding a mentor, it was really nice to know that they did have a formal program in place.
Yeah, that you've got somebody, and then, so good call. So you make the decision. And can you remind me, was part of this, it was tied into this FIRE movement? What was like going, I can't remember if this was like pre-fire or post-fire. I can't remember.
Okay. So here's the timeline. Okay. So I retired from my corporate job in my late 40s. Mm-hmm. Immediately, I started my program at Kansas State, which is what introduced me to the CFP courses.
Got you.
The program was about 2 years. Near the end of the program is when I had decided to sit for the CFP exam, and I had won the scholarship. Mm-hmm. So a lot of what I had to do in order to retire so early, I had to figure so many things out. So the retirement domain, I had gotten pretty close to almost mastering, because I needed to do it for myself.
Right.
So there was a lot, and plus doing my financial education, I would do some deep dive topics, like maybe things around Social Security for people retiring super early, because nobody else talked about it. Everybody always talks about Social Security when you're 65. I'm like, no, what if somebody retires early like me? Let's say they only work 10 or 15 years. Well, they still qualify for Social Security, and here's how it works. So I was looking at, taking it apart almost like an engineer to be able to explain it or understand it in a way that applied to me and maybe other people that were not following the normal cadence of retiring and things like that. So that prepared me quite a bit for some of the exam topics.
Well, I'm glad you brought up social. Well, maybe I'm not glad, or anyone listening, and you're probably not glad I brought Social Security, because that's a really tough part of the exam. There's just a lot of technical stuff there. And for, if you're going through the board exam too, it's like, it's okay to look at resources outside of, whether it's Kaplan or Dalton or Danko, one of the big providers. I always point students, or, let's say CFP hopefuls, as far as the Social Security part is concerned, the Social Security website is actually really easy to navigate. They got a Q&A just like on the other sites, but it's written in plain English. And then you see some of the stuff in your books, which is very highly technical, of course, and it's a little bit less technical on the Social Security website. So it's like, you were doing that research probably when you were going through early retirement research. Who knows? Like, some of that carried over to the board exam. Do you remember seeing any Social Security questions on the board exam? I don't want to bring up bad.
Yeah, a whole bunch. Yeah, Social Security is definitely a highly testable topic. So, if you want to pass the exam, you really have to get comfortable with that, and that may be beyond what you're getting in your review course. Like the review course I took, we had paper books. I hated that. And I probably should have done a little more research. For me, I'm a visual girl. I'm auditory, and I like to be doing things. So I had to supplement my review course with a lot of things. And I think anybody getting ready for the exam, there's a lot of great resources beyond your review course. And if listening or reading something 10 times and you're still not getting it, you need to do something different.
Right,
so for me,
exactly.
Yeah, for me, that was typically and because I was already a financial educator, I already had a nice bank or a nice subscription list of podcast hosts and professionals that I could go to and say, oh, this person talks about this a lot. And I love the way they explain things. And the same thing with YouTube. So while I was preparing for the exam, after I signed up and I was like going hardcore, I went into my podcast on Apple. And if the podcast was not one that had material that I knew was going to be on the exam, it got deleted. The only thing I subscribed to was CFP topic material.
Okay. So then you were like hyper focused. Yeah. And were you, as part of that, let's say, studying process, so you've got these outside resources. I'm just curious, like how many hours a day were you studying? And I mean, I ask a lot of people that, but in your case, it's like you're a career changer. So if somebody's a career changer, I don't want them to get scared off by, well, this person came from the industry. They only have to study a half hour a day. I might have to do, 30 hours a day or something like that. There's not enough hours in the day for me to study. So what was your timeline, a typical day in your study world?
Yeah, for me, I always look at quantity or quality over quantity. Okay. So when I see people talk about how many hours they spent, I don't know how meaningful that is to me, because I get more from 2 hours of quality studying where I'm mastering things and it's clicking versus 4 hours of, what did I just read? Yeah,
because sometimes you read through stuff and it's like, I mean, I fall victim to it. It's like, this is why I can't read before bed, because as soon as I go horizontal, it's over. Right. But like sometimes if I can get in a page or two, I'll read through a whole page and say, where was I? I was like reading the book, but I don't think I was here. I must have been somewhere else. I have no idea. But yeah, the quality over quantity for sure. The thing, and I'm just going to bet that you fell victim to this a little bit, is in the last like 8 to 10 weeks, you just think that you have to cram in as many questions and as many hours as possible. For a lot of people, that works. That worked for me. It doesn't look like it was maybe it wasn't the most efficient thing for me and others to do, but it doesn't seem like maybe you didn't fall into that trap. I shouldn't speak on your behalf.
Well, kind of. And I think we all probably have a little bit of that, because as the exam gets closer, boy, the anxiety starts setting in. Yeah. So for me, I learned so much while I was studying for this exam. And I did initially want to cram in a bunch of questions because that's what everybody said on the forums, right? You need to get in. Well, early on, to me, just doing a bunch of questions was not that helpful. Once I started mastering the material, or at least being more comfortable with the material, that's where doing more questions was more helpful to me and more valuable to me. So, but I only learned that during the process. And another example is, when I just got books for my review course, well, I probably should have done a little more research to figure out, do they have an online Q bank? Do they have online books and material and feedback and analysis? That's what was important to me. Now, I'd already signed up for the exam, so it was too late. So I could either cry, whine, and, say nasty things about it, but I didn't have time for that. So I'm mentally trying to say, okay, that's fine. Here's what I need to do to compensate for that and get back on track. And that's when a lot of these other resources came in handy. I mean, the review program still provided some structure and, of course, the expertise of the instructor. But I felt like I had a whole team of instructors. You included podcast hosts that were CFPs, attorneys, different credentials where they had their business and they were, sharing this information. A lot of people that had like a really great YouTube channel that they talked about these CFP topics. So that's why for me, as far as like the number of study hours, if I had to give you average, it was somewhere between 10 and 20, but
per week.
Per week.
Not, and I would per day. I'd be a little bit scared,
per week. And maybe even more than that. And you know what? If I throw in my study group, which I had a study group that was awesome.
Great idea.
And they had the same sort of commitment level as I did. I think that's important too. And then I had a study partner. So this was a different dynamic. Yeah, this accountability and also flexibility. We both, because it was kind of funny because I'm like, I'm never going to find someone that is not working during the day that wants to study with me, right? Everybody else is going to be doing their thing. Yeah. And so, but she did. She was in Virgin Islands or some tropical place with her boyfriend, and he was like finishing up his residency. And so she had her days. Yeah. So our schedules were similar. She reached out to me and, like a godsend. But for instance, if there was a day where, we had the same time every single week, and if we needed to push it back, it was no problem. It was just one person.
Change. It's not a big deal. Yeah.
Right. But our commitment level was the same. Like I remember there was one time and I could see the stress that she was having in a certain area. And she wanted to go over some stuff. And I had the flexibility, but we ended up being on together for 4 hours. Okay. Yeah, it wasn't planned that way. Normally, it would be like an hour and a half or 2 hours. But if it was a group, the group would have disbanded.
Probably the groups after a couple hours, probably you just run out of steam.
Right. And I mean, we did a bunch of different things during that session. It wasn't just like going through a bunch of questions for 4 hours. It was just different things that we were doing. And we were both very, auditory, visual learners. And also we would do these teach backs. Like when we thought we learned something pretty good, we only really knew when you could teach it back to the other.
Oh, nice.
So we say, you know what, let me do a teach back on that. And Lord, she had the patience of a saint when it came to the some of the formulas and the investment stuff. Oh my God, she was so patient. There were some times where she had to almost say it different ways 3 times. And I'm finally like, oh, I got it. And I'm thinking, oh my God, it was that easy. And she still stuck with me.
Well, that happens. If you get stuff from a different angle, it certainly, it makes a difference. That's like, and then, cause like when I'm either teaching or tutoring too, I'll tell students like, okay, you're going to get this from a different angle. You do have to teach this information back to me, before we move on, because, I have to be satisfied. But just sometimes, actually, I remember this, the very, very first person that I tutored a number of years ago, it was stuck on rabbi trusts. And that gives a lot of students a hard time. And it took me like 2 minutes to explain the big picture to him. He's like, that makes so much sense. Yeah. Why the heck didn't the book say it that way? I was like, well, the book, you got to give them a break. I mean, they got to put everything in words. It's hard. It's technical. So, but yeah, just verbalizing this stuff certainly helps. Now you're listening to a friend or a partner or whomever that's coming in from a different angle. Then you're going to different websites. So it's good. It's kind of like you're attacking the exam from so many different directions. But you guys then met up probably through the CFP forum or the chat forum?
Actually, we didn't. She was in Michigan at the time. Now she's in this tropical area and I'm in Ohio. So we both like were on the same like next gen FPA coffee chat or something.
Okay. I got
And, you know, probably it came up that I was taking the exam in November, or I thought I was at that time. She's like, oh, I'm taking November. And she reached out to me. She goes, hey, since you're taking in November and I'm taking in November, do you want to be study partners? And she said study partners. So she wanted to do the one-on-one. I'm like, you know what? I think that this would be a nice balance to because the study group, you kind of have to stay at the pace of the group. And so if you kind of get lost and, you know, and I don't want to slow down the pace, you know, and I don't want to get ahead of it. So it was just very different dynamics. So if you start adding in the time I spent with the study group, the time I spent with my study partner, Emmy, the time I'm going hiking and I've got a podcast in for 45 minutes to an hour, all of that, it could add up to be a lot more. But the variety was really helpful. So when people are saying, okay, I'm doing this many hours, well, I don't know what they're counting. Is it just hardcore where you're by yourself?
Yeah, like questions and book stuff. Is that
right. So for me, it was between 10 and 20. And I know that's a big range, but you know, it's just flexible like that. There were certain times where I had projects going on. Like I had this one project that was 2 weeks before my exam. And I almost thought I was crazy for doing that. But, you know, even though I don't work every day like the average person, sometimes I have big projects come my way that I have to be like all in.
Yeah, you have to switch gears really quickly and then, but you're okay. So, but 10 to 20, that sounds about, you know, because typically if you're 8 to 10 weeks out for the exam, you're going to, you know, you can turn things way up, but, you know, easing into that, it's like, you know, a couple hours a day, maybe 4 to 6 hours on the weekend. You know, so what is that, 10 to 16 hours? And if you're saying 10 to 20, I think you're right in that. You're right in that range. That pretty much makes sense. Another question, so is, you know, so it was Kansas State that you mentioned, right? That was okay. So did they have also like a boot camp, for lack of a better term, like a
review program?
Yeah, like a 4-day review program,
Oh, no, they didn't have that. Like and I remember having the conversation with one of my classmates. He had been a financial planner for like 20 plus years and he didn't have a CFP. So he was taking the 6 classes to get a CFP.
Okay.
And we had the discussion. I'm like, wow, even though I got through these classes, I don't even feel close to being ready to taking the exam. And I could not even imagine someone taking this exam without a review course. Well, he did. You know, because he had 20 years.
Right.
Well, he didn't pass.
Okay.
So I'm sure he went back again, probably took a review course or maybe hired a tutor or something, and he passed. And he obviously had the knowledge. He's been doing this for 20 years, but the approach of the CFP, it's not enough to just have practical experience.
No, because so I've seen it a lot where people that are in the industry for, let's say 20, just as an example, this 20 years, you're in the industry. I've seen I can't put a number on it, but it seems that there's like a higher failure rate with people that have been in the industry for a long time because they're answering questions from the perspective of a practitioner. We have to answer the questions from the perspective of the board. They want you to know certain things. For career changers like you, that you really didn't have any other than the own research. Like you had no experience at all in financial services. I mean, you had your own thing that you were working on and retiring early, but you did not come from a financial services background, really.
No, I didn't. Unless you would count, and I guess I would, because there was a lot of CFP topics, maybe general principles, retirement, things like that, when it comes to my financial education. So even before I retired from my corporate job, I was doing financial education work, workshops, and it wasn't just budgeting. Like I wanted to get to the higher level stuff. Like, here's how a Roth IRA works. Here are the tax implications of a Roth versus a traditional. Here are some tips on your estate planning. Name your beneficiary. So I was always in this mindset that we make things too complicated. Yeah, it's like everybody does need an estate plan. You're right. It doesn't mean that they need to draw up a complicated trust. It means go online and name your beneficiary. Like that's step one.
Right. Okay, but you were not doing plans.
I wasn't doing plans or anything like that.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, that's like a pure career change because I do run across people too that that were teachers. Seems like we draw on a lot of teachers, which kind of makes sense.
Engineers.
Yeah, engineers. That's definitely a different breed.
I have a good friend that was an engineer. He passed the first time as well.
And I would just happen to bet that the engineer probably stuck to those books. Like, it's very precise. I'm not gonna kind of look at other resources.
Yeah, if you want to hear something funny about an engineer, so he was a executive level engineer, and he lived locally to me, and we met on the forums. It was so funny, but he had taken the same review program that I took. And he says, well, let's meet up. He took it in March where they didn't have the results back right away, but he was willing to let me look at his books. I was going to buy my own, but again, this was an early peek into the exam. So met up with him. He had 2 pages of handwritten notes with instructions for me about how to study for the exam based on his experience. I'm like, oh my God, you wrote
sounds like an engineer.
That is an engineer.
Nice.
But I was so thankful. And that's the whole give back, pay it forward type of thing, because he didn't have to do that. And it was just really, really nice to talk to someone who had just finished it in the same program that I did.
Overall, it's a pretty good bunch of people. Like in this whole, let's say, community, if you will. I haven't met a bad person. So, well, in the last couple of minutes, I want to ask you, and I don't think we got into it, but you mentioned that, okay, you've retired, but you've got these projects going on. Is there, financial education that you're doing now or that you want to let others know about? And then the second part of my question is for the career changers, like what advice do you have for them? But, do you have like a website that you want to get out to people that you think that would help in this realm or in others?
Yeah, I don't do a lot of promoting of myself, but my story is out there. I've been on a lot of different platforms. Yeah. So I have my link tree where it just talks about the most current things that I'm doing. But honestly, where I spend most of my time that I get the most value out of is working with companies, organizations, even government agencies to provide financial education to their employees or their organization. One of the big things I did last year was working with a very large county government. And, they had that public service loan forgiveness waiver. Yeah. That had a time limit on it. It was something I was very interested in. So obviously everyone that worked for that county government already met one criteria, and that's to work for a qualified employer. So we did some immersive work with them so that they could take advantage of the waiver. And the first thing I said was that it's really not a hard program, but they have breached the trust when they first rolled this program out. But here's why you want to take advantage of it. I've done all the hard work, and I just break it down very simply so that they now have hope. They now have a little bit more trust in the process, and I'm taking them through. Good. So we've got hundreds of people at this that work for this county government where, 2 people benefit. Obviously, the people who's getting their loans forgiven because they're government workers, but also their employer, the government agency, even though they didn't forgive it and they didn't have to give the money to them, they're going to credit their employer with helping them to. So things like that, I get to choose, and that's what I enjoy doing. Gotcha. But yeah, I mean, and honestly, I connect with a lot of people on LinkedIn. That's sort of my place where I feel like I get the least amount of trash. So yeah, and LinkedIn has all of my contact. I'm on Instagram. I'm on. I don't do a whole lot on Twitter, but I know the financial planning world they do. But LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. I'm there, and I'm very involved in the financial planning community. I've been on my local FPA chapter for the last couple of years, even before I got my CFP. So, so that's what I'm doing now. And I kind of want that to remain flexible so that I can really do the things that I love, because I get so energized by it.
Yeah. Nice.
I'm sorry. Well, you were asking about career changers.
Yeah. If I'm tuning in, just pretend I'm a career changer. Like what's like step 1, 2, and maybe 3? I'm as green as can be right now. I have no idea.
Yeah, no problem. And I think it always starts with I have no idea, just like you said, right?
Okay.
Should I do this? Is this overkill? It's always worth exploring. If you're after exploring, then there's a lot of resources, the CFP board, the FPA, all kinds of resources. Your outcome might be, you know what, it is too much and I don't need to go down this road, or I don't need to go down it right now. But if you move to step 2 and you're like, you know what, I really love this. I really want to do this. I'm ready to make this change. So once you do that, there's all these organizations in this world, right? You've got FPA, you've got stuff from the CFP board. And that's how I kind of started. Start getting involved in that, and you will. And the forums. There's a lot of community. We connected on the forum, so there's a lot of communicating on the forum. But I do want to mention some of the big advantages that career changers have, and that I believe I have. Okay, all right. So typically you're a little bit older. Let's say you're 35, you're 40, you're 50, even 60. Yeah, you have experienced a lot of the CFP topics. Maybe you've thought about retirement and you dig into that. Maybe your kids have gone to school and you learned about education funding. There's so many experiences that you may have had, or that you can easily start to relate to what you have going on now. As I was studying for the exam, anytime I could put a face to a topic I'm working on, like a 529, I have leftover 529 money from my daughter. So whenever you can break it down practically like that and bring it into your own life, it just makes it more interesting, more exciting, and you've got that benefit. Plus, more than likely, you have a ton of skills that you gain from whatever your other career was that can be easily applicable to some of these topics and your career.
Well, I'd say, as much as like one thing that is, it's not the most exciting topic, but it's property and like auto insurance.
Right.
So every time I teach reteach an insurance class, I'll go through my property and casualty policy, because it's like, because I know how to teach it. Obviously, there's practical experience there. I don't sell it, but I was like, okay, now I understand the policy a little bit more. So it kind of helps that way. But so getting involved with the different sites, CFP site. I'm sure you can just do pretty simple Google searches for things.
There's so many online things as well, which have made a difference since COVID. And when I would attend some of those like events or meetings, I wouldn't just be silent with my camera off. I would be chatting. Sometimes I would instant message someone or private message someone. So being present and involved and interested really makes a difference, because some of those meetings, I'm on there with 40 people, but you've only got 5 people that are really engaged. Okay.
Well, I think if there are but for the career changers out there, I think they've got plenty of information. You're a pure career changer, 100%. You made it through. Any other piece of advice that you'd like to provide for those that are out there?
Yeah, I just want to wave, the career changers in. I'm waving you in. It's definitely worth exploring. And you will learn so much about yourself as you go through this process. And I think because you have experience from another career, you can design this however you want it. The CFP practitioners and the financial planning world, it's changing, and you could be a part of that change. Yeah, totally.
Well, that's some great advice. Jackie, I'm glad that we're able to talk today. And I think we first kind of, got in touch with each other. I think you had not taken the exam yet.
Oh, I had not.
Right? Yeah.
I was just thinking about it.
Stuff. So, well, no, thank you. Thanks again for coming on. I know you're going to help a lot of people also going forward. And I'd like to thank you for being on the Earn Your Marks podcast today. Appreciate it.
Oh, Sev, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Earn Your Marks podcast. For more information or to get in touch, visit us at proexamtutors.com.